So my talk today is called Already Free, a Juneteenth celebration. Many of you know that this coming Friday, June 19th, is the celebration of the moment when our people who had not yet realized that the war for their freedom had been won were notified, 1865, that they were free, that they were already free. And so I want to start this Juneteenth celebration with a traditional ceremony that is a deep, deep part of who we are as African people. This is our libation ceremony, and if you're unfamiliar, it is a tradition where we call upon our ancestors and we bring water, the elixir of life, to something that is living like this plant. And so what I'm going to do is just start by going back. See, I'm going back to remember that Black people were the first people to walk this planet. That everyone that has ever lived is a descendant of that legacy, of that power. And so what we do during libation is I will pour the water into this living earth. And each time I invite you that right where you are, you seal the word that has been spoken by saying Ashe. So we remember the first people. We don't know their names. We know that anthropologists call them things like Lucy and Old Bones. But we revere them as the first, the original people, and we say Ashe. We remember the Black people who built civilizations, who built not just tribes, not just nations, but whole empires. They were the creators, the first creators of language, of art, of medicine, of science. We have always been the first. And so I am absolutely honor them by saying Ashe. And then as we move forward as people across the continent, whether we were in Kemet, the ancient name for Egypt, or we were in Ghana, or whether we were building Songhai empires, whatever we were doing, there was a consciousness of community. And I just want to celebrate and revere and name and honor all of those ancestors who came together to celebrate life and each other. And I'm thankful for their wisdom, for their healing power, for their communal nature. And I say Ashe. And then a thing happened, that people in the world misunderstood how the world works, how God works, and they began to think that they could own property, and that even more, they could own people. And so they brought to our great ancestry, to our great people, a horror, a Holocaust. Breathe. I know we don't like for a thing to be named or compared to another thing, but we're going to just acknowledge that when tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people die, it's a Holocaust. So this African Holocaust that we call Ma'afa, we are going to recognize right now and honor right now all of those people who survived the belly of the beast, the bottom of the ship. We're going to recognize that some of them made it through, and some of them said, I will not partake in this madness, and they jumped over the side. But for those that survived, we honor their legacy because we are the descendants of the strong who said, I will survive this. I will transcend this. And we honor them and we say Ashe. And then as we arrived in this place, the ingenuity, the creativity, the character, the resilience to stand firm even as our lives were destroyed on a daily basis, our families destroyed on a daily basis, our bodies destroyed on a daily basis, and still we found a way to make food from slops and community and family where it had been torn apart. And for those people who found a faith, who found a language when theirs was stripped away, I want to honor them today by saying Ashe. And even as the illusion of freedom came, we saw that there still was not equality, and we worked and we survived and we achieved in the classroom. We created medicine and inventions. We took a peanut and made 1,000 things. We did amazing things. We created art and freedom songs. We fought and we stood and we marched and we sat in for our freedom. And even as we were spit upon, we maintained our dignity. We claimed our beauty. We said it loud. And I thank all of our ancestors who worked for our freedom, and I say Ashe. And now we come forward. We come forward to this time where we still stand fighting for our freedom, fighting for our equality, but doing it with an artfulness, with a gracefulness, with a dedication that says, I am the descendant of the strong. I am the embodiment of the resilient. I am creative. I will find a way out of no way because this is not the rough side of the mountain. I come from a great people. And so I honor those today who honor their ancestors. And I honor those who have been giving their lives so that we may wake up and see the truth of the divine that we are. And I say Ashe. I honor those who have lost their lives too soon for no reason. I call all of their names. I call Breonna Taylor. I call George Floyd. I call Oscar Grant right here. I call Atiana Jefferson. I call Sandra Bland. I call all their names. And I know I don't know all their names. I call all the people, the Marsha P. Johnsons. I call all the people from all the walks of life. And I say Ashe. And then last but not least, I honor the ones yet to come. The children who will inherit whatever legacy we stand for today. I call upon us to be the kind of people who they call when they do libation. And I say Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. This is the way we honor our ancestors. We remember, we call their names. Wherever you are, as you watch this, call on the name of your people. Call on the name of the ones you know and the ones you don't. Because it's not all about who was a famous celebrity. It's about whose legacy we inherit. So call on Big Ma and Grandpa and all of them. And remind yourself that you didn't come from nowhere. So, my talk today is already free, a Juneteenth celebration. And what I want to tell you about freedom is that it is a mental condition. Freedom is a consciousness. It is an inner knowing and attitude. And so when we start thinking about the freedom of African people, the first thing we need to know is that we were born free. My brother Bayan Bakari says, we are not up from slavery. We are down from the pyramids. These are people who created everything, everywhere, were the first in so many places. We want to honor all the peoples of the world and all the things that they did. We're not the only, but in so many cases, we're the first, and that story is not told. See? The stories of empires and civilizations and the regality of the original people, the majesty of who we are is so important to understanding who we become, because if you think our people were slaves, you're confused, because we were not slaved, we were enslaved Africans. And this is important for us to know, that we came from places, from civilizations, from people, from societies. And when you know those societies, when you know those names, when you know those 54 things that are now countries, when you know those hundreds of languages, you understand that what was lost was not just a body. What we were separated from was a legacy, an inheritance. And so I just invite you to make that reconnection now, that we are from the diaspora, which means Black people are all over the world, have been all over the world, ruled the world for thousands of years. White supremacy is new. We ruled the world, black and brown people, for thousands of years. So remember this as people are teaching you that you are less than black people. It's not true. You come from greatness. We come from greatness. And I want to tell you that what you think about Africa, right, is what you think about black people. And so many of us have been taught to think of the entire continent and its complexity as disease and war and famine. Meanwhile, half of Europe goes on vacation there. You have not been taught the beauty of the place that you come from. You have not been taught. I remember there was a while ago a shooting that happened in a mall. And somebody said to me, I didn't know they had malls in Africa. Because if I tell you to think about Paris, France, you know a picture. If I tell you to think about London, you know a picture. If I tell you to think about Japan, you know a picture. But what if I tell you to think about Dakar, Senegal? What if I tell you to think about Accra, Ghana? What if I tell you to think about even countries like Kenya or Nigeria? Can you show me an image of what that place is? All it takes is Google. All it takes is a willingness to read a book, to open something up, to look at a picture of a whole country, continent, civilization. And please, let's stop calling Africa a country. It is not Japan and Africa. It is not France and Africa. There are countries, know their names. There are hundreds of languages. Understand the complexity of this place that is our birthplace. And so I want to talk about resilience. I want to talk about people who didn't just survive the Ma'afa. We thrived. What does that mean? To be able to come to this place in chains, live in the midst of slavery and Jim Crow, and still build Black Wall Street, and still have a Harlem Renaissance, and still become Congress people and build our own colleges and institutions and be doctors and be inventors and be creators, and never, Benjamin Banneker, be given the credit. Madam C.J. Walker, never be given the credit. But what about this legacy that we are celebrating here today on Juneteenth? What about this legacy? What about a Harriet Tubman who was willing to go in the dark of the night to a place that she had never seen and go back and get more people? What is that? She said, I freed 1,000 slaves, but I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a people who were so entrenched in white supremacy, we didn't even know there was something different, but she said there is. This is not who you are. You are not a slave. We are already free. Let's go. We are already free. Let's go. People are not going to give us our freedom. We're going to take it. All we got to do is walk up out of here. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't as simple. But it started with a consciousness that we still have. Frederick Douglass said, I had reached the point at which I was not afraid to die. I was not afraid to die. See, we're mad at people who are mad, but we don't understand that's how this country was founded. That's how freedom was fought for in so many cases. But when we do it, right? He said, I have found that which I was not afraid to die for. The Spirit made me a free man in fact when I remained a slave in form. Do you understand what that means? The Spirit made me a free man in fact. Do you understand that he is saying this is what religious science teaches? People say, come on, you got to teach religious science. Let me tell you what it teaches. It says, in fact, I'm free. Frederick Douglass didn't study Ernest Holmes, but he understood that in fact I'm free. Even in form, I'm a slave. It means you can never enslave my mind. I know who and whose I am, and I will break these chains, these shackles, and be the fullness of who I can be. So what happened? if we know that we know that we know what was happening to us that caused us to shrivel like a raisin in the sun, what happened? Well, Brother Malcolm let us know. He asked us a very important question that we need to continue to answer as long as we live in the belly of this beast called white supremacy. He said, who taught you to hate yourself? Do you understand that everything you believe that's been negative about being black has been taught to you? It's not true. You're not ugly. There ain't nothing wrong with your skin, your body, your nose, your shape, your lips. There's nothing wrong. This is about someone else teaching you that what is not like them is not beautiful. And it's not just black people. That's being taught all over the world. People are bleaching their skin all over the world because of something called anti-blackness. But guess what? We ain't buy it. Not for long. Not for long. We said black is beautiful in the face of repression and oppression and depression. Somebody said in our community, that ain't true. And the whole world was trying to wear an afro back then. And still now, whatever we do, when we say I'm fly, everybody want to be that. Because the truth is oppression and white supremacy hurts all of us. And so here we are with our magic, with our black girl magic, with our African stance, with our hair, with our face, with our feet, with our hands, being bad as we want to be. Yes. And the whole world loves it, even as they deny us our freedom. But they can't. No one can deny us our freedom because everything we got with a consciousness of remembrance of who we are. No one can take that away from us. But one of the things that's happening right now is that we're getting to a place where everybody's realizing and admitting that that attempt has been happening for a long time. So, white folks, I want to talk to you for a second. Although I actually want to talk to all of us, there's this book that I have come to love called White Fragility by this woman, Robin DiAngelo. I want to call her a sister because I believe the subtitle of this book should be Black People, You Ain't Crazy. So she tells the story of Jackie Robinson. And she allows us to expose the way this story is told for the white supremacist notion that it is. I know some of y'all got to breathe when I keep saying white supremacy, but I think we're at that point in history where it's okay for you to take a look at the hard words. So here's what she says. The story of Jackie Robinson is a classic example of how whiteness obscures racism by rendering whites, white privilege, and racist institutions invisible. So here's the trick, right? If we say whiteness doesn't exist because we all human, if we say white privilege doesn't exist because I'm an individual and I worked hard for what I got, if we say racist institutions don't exist because some people are just lazy and don't work as hard as others, if we say all of that, then that's how whiteness obscures racism. She says, Robinson is often celebrated as the first African American to break the color line and play in Major League Baseball. And while Robinson was certainly an amazing baseball player, this storyline depicts him as racially special. Come on, who's been racially special before? You know about that. Oh, you're just so different than other, black people. I really like you. Okay. It depicts him as racially special, as a black man who broke the color line himself. Now, but the subtext is that Robinson finally had what it took to play with whites, as if no black athlete before him was strong enough to compete at that level. Now, if you know anything about the Negro Leagues, you know that ain't true. Imagine if instead, DiAngelo says, the story went something like this. Jackie Robinson, the first black man whites allowed to play Major League Baseball. Come on with that version. right? Because what she says is this version makes a critical distinction because no matter how fantastic a player Robinson was, he simply could not play in the major leagues if whites who controlled the institutions did not allow it. Were he to walk onto the field before being granted permission by white owners and policymakers, the police would have removed him. How many people have been removed by the police or the policers because white folks weren't ready, or other folks weren't ready to see black people in their fullness? So we have to say that these narratives of racial exceptionality obscure the reality of ongoing institutional white control while reinforcing the ideologies of individualism and meritocracy. What is she talking about? She's saying that when people teach you to hate yourselves, it's for their benefit. That way they can control the narrative and say, well, these are the exceptional ones. Let me tell you something about us. We're all exceptional. All exceptional. It's not about behavior, it's about divinity. And this teaching that I love, this religious science, this science of mine, says every single one of us is God in the flesh. So black people, come on with that. Come on with that. We're not racially special. We have been subject to an oppression that has made us hate ourselves for the benefit of a narrative that's fake. We are already free. We are already bad by ourselves. We are already the best in so many things. I had a student in my class one time, and we were doing an interracial conversation, and a white person asked her, she said, well, what is it that you need white people to do? And she said one of the most radical things I've ever heard in my life. She said, leave us alone. If you just stop messing with us, we'll be fine. Because look at what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the creativity, the resilience, how we made hip hop because there wasn't no instruments. We made jazz. We made all improvisation. This is what we did and changed the world when they said that rat-a-tat-tat ain't no music. But it was the song of a voiceless people saying, you can take everything I have. And I'm going to tell you the story about that. But then even that thing was perverted in a way that expressed a self-hatred for the benefit of those people who owned things. Still trying to own people, right? I like to say that commercial hip hop is sometimes a safari, right? Ooh, look at them black people. Ooh, you sell drugs? You put a cap in somebody? Write a song about it so I can hear it and play it in my car, in my house, at my parties. Don't fall for that. Don't fall for that. This is not our story about ourselves. This is your story about ourselves. We are complicated. We some of that, but we're a lot more. And finally, we're getting opportunities to tell our own story and look at how complicated it is when we have a chance to do that. Look at how rich and beautiful. I remember seeing the movie Moonlight and my mind was blown just at the direction. Look at how beautiful we look in the right lighting. Just that part was so amazing to see, not to mention the complicated story that had never been told of what a strong black man could be. Oh, I want to preach all day on that, but I'm going to keep going. Let's see what else we got. Oh, so Susan Taylor likes to say this is not the rough side of the mountain. And Dr. King said, if the cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition now will surely fail. Do you understand? We went through that. We got through that. We made it through that. I remember my grandmother looking at Barack Obama becoming the president and just crying with disbelief. I remember when he won in Iowa, me having disbelief. And this brother said, hope. Hope can create change because his mind was free. He saw something like Harriet Tubman that we could have that seemed impossible. Barack Hussein Obama? Come on now. With a black wife. I mean, some of y'all know what I mean when I say that. Come on now. That was amazing. And then I want to tell you, because I always like to balance the stories that we know about the brothers with the stories of the sisters. I want to go back and tell you, we have these freedom songs. And one of my favorite, because it's about vision, is Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. But I want to tell you, that's not the original song. A sister named Alice Wine took that as the title for a song that used to be called Keep Your Hand on the Plow. Do you understand? This is what I'm talking about when we change everything, change the whole. We can change the whole narrative. The song said, keep your hand on the plow. And she said, no, keep your eyes on the prize. Do you understand? That's what I'm asking you right now. Do we keep our hand on the plow or do we keep our eyes on the prize? This is the opportunity, is for us to heal ourselves. We don't need nobody. What'd she say? Just leave us alone. Heal ourselves. We have that. We created medicine. Do you understand that? We created medicine. Black and brown people created medicine. We can heal ourselves. This is what we've been telling ourselves for centuries, for thousands of years, how to heal ourselves, right? Creatively. One of my favorite writers, maybe one of my favorite black people of all times, is Toni Morrison. And she said, freeing yourself was one thing, but claiming ownership of that freed self was another. So now we're talking about the next level. Okay, the body is out of bondage, but what about owning who I am? That requires us to go into that still small voice and ask the question, well, who am I? If I'm not who they said I am, then who am I? And that's what Juneteenth is. It's a celebration of, you didn't liberate me. I didn't even know what was going on with you. I get to decide when I'm free. She also said, Toni Morrison also said, if you want to fly, you got to give up the thing that weighs you down. I want to tell you a story of how I came to this philosophy, religious science, the science of the mind, that if you change your thinking, you can change your life. I took the foundations class with Reverend Eloise Oliver, our beloved minister and my mentor. And I was so upset about the idea that all things work together for good. All things work together for good. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around that. And she said, I kept saying, well, what about slavery? How does that work? Because you see, I'm very into my black history. I grew up in Detroit, which I like to consider the Wakanda of the United States, right? And so I was like, nah, all things don't work together for good. What about slavery? And she said, talk to me about something that you experienced. All right. And so I spent that entire class working with the individual people in my life, in my family, in my relationships who I had demonized, who I had decided were evil, who I had decided were the cause of all the problems in my life. And by the end of those 16 weeks, I had come to a place of deep forgiveness. Not because what they did was right, because I knew that my freedom was more valuable than my holding on to that pain, to that hostility. This is what Toni Morrison is saying, is if you want to get free, you're going to have to let go of that which no longer serves. You're going to have to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Let us renew our mind right now and let go of the focus on who is the enemy. I don't have any enemies because I am one with God. So no weapon formed against me shall ever prosper. So everything you doing is just an attempt to remind me who and whose I am, because I got the power to shape the truth about who I am. I got the power. That great mystic, Howard Thurman, said it this way: in the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whisper of the heart, giving strength to weakness, courage to fear, hope to despair. Where did he say we needed to go to heal ourselves? To the whisper of the heart. Reverend Michael Beckwith says, pain pushes until vision pulls. We're in pain, but I have a question. What is freedom? What does it look like? What are we pushing for? I am a spiritual activist because I believe that it is important for us to be pulled by vision, that we have to know not what we are against, but what we're for. And so when people are telling you that they are for abolishing, not just defunding, but abolishing the police, that is a people of vision. That is not a reactionary people who's just like, I want them to stop. That is a community of visionaries that are saying there's something better than this, and people are so upset. You're going to mess up the election, and that's not what we're trying to get. We're not trying to get off the back of the bus. We got a dream. Do you understand? That's bigger than this moment. And some of my comrades in this struggle have been working on that dream and being laughed at for years. For years. Because this system is not working for anybody. The crimes are not being solved, and you call the police and you get a crime committed on you just for calling. And people are abusing the system and calling on police for Tamir Rice because he had a toy gun and she knew it was a toy. She called and said, I think it's a toy. What you call for? Do you understand? What is freedom? Freedom is not just stopping what hurts. Freedom is a vision that pulls, a knowing of the truth that God is the most powerful source that there ever is, ever was, or ever will be. So if you know that, since you know that, because if you're here with me today, you're here because you know that. You don't call me. You don't watch me and Jennifer Johns and Carol and the East Bay Church unless you already know you're free. So I just want to keep on with that, keep on. Because new thought is not new. It's ancient wisdom. You go back to Kemet, and on the Luxor temple, it says the body is the house of God, and whoever shall know thyself shall know God. This is what we teach in this philosophy, that God and I are one, that everything that God is, all the power, all the peace, all the presence, everything that God is, I am. And because everything that God is, I am, I can speak my word into the fertile soil of the law, and whatever I declare will happen. So come on with abolish police. I'm not worried about all the resistance to that. I want people with vision. It's important that we understand how we think about God. Because I'm going to tell you this. If someone has convinced you that God is not your color or gender, then they have secured your oppression. They've secured your oppression. So what do you believe about who and whose you are? This is the most important question. The most important question is not how we're going to fight, it's how we're going to win. What does winning look like? It's being free. And guess what? I already won. Already won. Because my mind is free. And as my mind is free, everything is going to follow. Bob Marley, who I think might be one of the most spiritual people to ever walk the planet, he said, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, because none but ourselves can free our minds. We have to free our minds. That's it. Everything else is going to follow. So I want to end by a quote from one of the most powerful, revolutionary, spiritual sister warriors to ever walk this planet, our sister Ashada Shakur. And this is what she says. This planet needs a people's revolution, a humanist revolution. Revolution is not about bloodshed or about going to the mountains and fighting. We will fight if we are forced to, but the fundamental goal of revolution must be peace. We need a revolution of the mind. Come on, Asada. We need a revolution of the heart. We need a revolution of the spirit. The power of the people is stronger than any weapon. A people's revolution cannot be stopped. We need weapons of mass construction, weapons of mass love. It is not enough to just change the system. We need to change ourselves. It is our duty to fight. It is our duty to win. We have nothing to lose but our chains. So as our brother Marcus Mosiah Garvey told us, up ye mighty race, accomplish what you will.